So I want to start with a story. So Winston Churchill was running for prime minister in England, and at that time they had a practice, and I think we ought to get it back in this country, in which two people running for a political office would gather together at the same place, and they'd have an auditorium, and they'd give their spiels, who's going to vote for who. So anyway, they would flip a coin to see who was going to go first. And on this day of this appearance, Churchill's opposition won the toss, and so he went first. And the guy decided to have his sole, the only thing he'll talk about in this political speech was how much alcohol Winston Churchill had consumed. And he had all these drinking stories, drinking, stories. And he got done, he pulled out of his pocket a marker, and he went up the podium like this, and he says, I want you to imagine that this room was a vessel, and it would hold a fluid, and if all the alcohol Winston Churchill had consumed was poured in this vessel, and he drew the marker out there and he put a line right across just like this. That would be the fluid line in this room, all the alcohol Churchill had consumed. So Winston had to follow that. So he gets out of his chair, and he walks over there, and he looks at that podium, and he studies that line, and he gazes up the ceiling, and he says, so much to do in so little time. So he knew how to defuse a situation. So now we're going to talk about decision making. I want to share with you a story that I think can help us out a lot. And the story comes from a group of researchers. They were business researchers, and they undertook a very ambitious project. They decided to write the definition of great and lasting in the business world. So they wrote the definition of great and lasting, and then they, after they set that definition, they went out to try to find, see if they could find companies who would meet the high standards of great and lasting. They set their standards so high that when you looked at 1,400 companies, only 11 met their standards. So these 11 companies were viewed by these researchers at both great and lasting. Now they also found other companies to compare them to, and they started to ask the question, why were these 11 companies so successful over this long period of time? Was it luck? Was it leadership? Well, what was it? I mean, you know, were they in the gold business and had the right land? Well, anyway, what they did was they did the research work. They asked the questions when they interviewed the people, and they came back and they compared notes. And the notes were so, they found these commonalities with them that they were able to write a book called Good to Great. And Good to Great is the result of interviewing people who were responsible for creating great and lasting. So now I know this is in the business world, but I want you to tell me if you don't think that doesn't apply to us, because I think it really, really does. So amongst these 11 companies, these are absolutely universal characteristics. A great and lasting business always deal with people issues first. They will never discuss a what or a why if they have not resolved to the who's. So they will never put a person in a position of any kind whatsoever if they haven't found excellence. They absolutely campaign for excellence. Great and lasting companies commit themselves to facing the facts regardless. They are committed to the truth. Whatever it is we have to deal with it, we never cover things up. We believe that the truth is what guides us. They believe they will succeed without condition. This is actually called the Stockdale paradox. Imagine they found these things so strong in these 11 companies that they gave them a name. Stockdale paradox comes from a guy who got shot down in the Vietnam War, was the highest ranking officer, was the most brutally tortured because of his rank, and yet he lived in an environment that so many other people died, and when he got out, was released, they said, how did you survive? Why did you survive? Well, he says, I'll tell you right now who didn't make it. Who's that? It was the optimist. See, the optimist in a very difficult situation say, things will be better next year. No, Stockdale says, that just could get you in trouble. Why did he survive? Because I believe I'm going to survive. Period. This is such a strong influence in these companies that they gave it this name. Why? Because to be successful, you have to believe you will be successful. Period. Whether next year, good year, bad year, you're going to be successful because you believe in that. Okay? Next one. This is called the hedgehog fox. And actually, it's a very good discussion with this time of thing, organic farming. Business strategies, they found, fall in two camps. A fox was named as such because just like a fox, very good eyesight, terrific hearing, ready to move real fast, going to make that next big move over there. A fox is always getting prepared for something great that's going to happen. Next year is going to be a terrific year. I'm going to nail that market over there. I'm going to move over here. They're on the move right away, and boy, they're sharp. Never make it in business world. Never. A fox strategy was never found in one of the 11 companies. What did they find? They called the hedgehogs. Hedgehog's really different than a fox. Looks kind of stupid, definitely kind of slow, got fantastic defense strategies. What does a hedgehog know? 3 things they know really, really well. They know their passions, they know their best potential talents, and they know their key economic drivers. And they know the intersection of those 3 things, and they never let go of that. Why would they? They like doing it. They're potentially the best at it in the world, and they understand it pays their bills. So in those 11 companies, that always came out that was a centerpiece of their business. Last one is they found, well, not the last one. This is a summary of this book. But they create a culture of discipline. And that, again, I think, and what I've observed over the years of organic farming, is oftentimes missing. People get into this for the wrong reason. They don't understand the long-term anchoring, that you have to have discipline. So we talk about some examples on the farm. These apply to farming. I think they really do. People principles apply regardless of the business scale. Businesses that were not run by machines. This is our farm in northern Iowa. Our farms are not run by machines either. So anyway, we're long-term members of Organic Valley Co-op, live where I was born, past president of Practical Farmers of Iowa. We continue to do on-farm research. So we'll tell you a quick few things about the farm, but our motto is that we will see the bounty of the Lord in the land of the living. What does that mean? We think we'll see a good, prosperous life based on biological diversity. And when we adapted that motto, we've had that for probably 20 years, I really believe it's true. Biological diversity has to be our roots, and we have a faith in God, but that's how we see it. Another one, a motto we have is that diversity leads to stability. So our farm has got a beef cow herd, it has a brood sow herd, we grow some cash crops, but we're a fairly diversified farm, very small farm. But if we can learn to ask ourselves better questions, can this lead us to a more constructive relationship with the people around us? Yes, it can. Improving our net income? Yes, it can. And a better understanding of the natural world around us? Let's explore all 3. But let me ask this leadership question. Do leaders lead with statements, or do leaders lead with questions? If you study leadership, it becomes real obvious. Leaders lead with questions. They question to get inside the issues, and they question to de-energize situations. People think, well, great leaders go out there and they tell people where to go and what to do. Not really true at all if you study leadership. All right, let's take a look at you in the center with some resources over here, and people who might be influential or give you advice or have some ideas or maybe peer pressure. We aren't even talking to each other over here. I mean, there's no point. Why come to a conference? Alan Segal once made the comment, the greatest single barrier to learning is existing knowledge. If you know it all, you aren't going to learn much, are you? So anyway, we aren't talking to each other because we got the answers. Well, that doesn't work very well. So on this comes from holistic management. So the next thing we do is that, oh, you're over there and you've got a problem. Maybe you come to a conference with some idea and you get exposed to peer pressure, ideas, influences, advice. But if you notice in here, the spears all have one color. They have one color because they only have one thing on their mind. If you increase yields, everything's going to be fine. Might be an idea. Just listen to me, do what the crowd says, whatsoever. If you notice, they don't have any shared values, but they're very willing to tell you what to do. Probably try to sell you something. What's wrong with this approach? A single color represents too narrow focused. It's all about yield. How about this one? Quality of life has got nothing to do with how I run my farm. You heard that one? I heard this one. Global warming just means we're going to grow full season corn farther north. Really? Very, very narrow approach. So the next move is to improve the flow of information by making the spears so that they have more understanding. So this is a multi-disciplined approach, and it generally is where we are today with information flow, that we have a better sources of information who are still very willing to try to tell you what to do. A better expert should help, but it's based on a broader range of consideration. But guess what's missing? In general, the information is more useful, but what doesn't it look at first? What did the successful companies do first? They always deal with people issues. So we haven't dealt with people issues at all. So you get sold solutions, or you get influenced by solutions that just create a new series of problems. Why? Because you didn't deal with what you have. But now here's what I think is a solution on our farm in northern Iowa. Now I call that giant ragweed pressure. You think that's a crop? No, that's giant ragweed pressure. And on the right-hand side is hybrid rye, a winter cereal grain that I think really can do us a lot of good. This is going to change our crop rotation and improve our weed control, and I'm really excited about it. But how does this fit into things? So we have to take a look at, these are influences, but what do? So following holistic management, now we change the model. And this is really, in my opinion, is the correct model. You were in the center, and you notice the flow of those arrows? It goes out from you. So around you are peers, advice, financial influences, multidisciplinary approaches, ideas, research information. And guess what? You've resolved to start with, are you correct for this? And then outside comes the influences. And guess what? Everybody wins here. See, if, let's use hybrid rye for an example. If I would come to here and try to tell you that this is the solution to your farm's problems, you just get the seed from the sulfate over there, and here's how you do it over there, we've never really, all we're doing is putting pressure on you, assuming that I know that you know what's best for you. But when you turn it the other way around and you decided that, well, here's where I'm at, and you're a sphere of influence, you might be sound towards what I want, or maybe the research information what I want, the power is on you. And that's what the information flow really has to be. It is really unfair for people given advice to give them the responsibility of solving your problems. And that is why in our conferences and why organic agriculture is as good as what it is that we are really farmer-driven, trying to ask questions and resolve things, and the people issues are really do come first. I got to tell you a real quick story. This is off the subject a little bit. I was on the board of directors of Moses when the organic conference was in Cincinnati, and then it got moved to La Crosse. And I was on the board. We were a couple years in La Crosse. So we have these board meetings with 50,000 things to talk about. Two managers from the motels in Wisconsin wanted to meet with our board meeting. So, okay, that's fine, busy day, you know. So the guys come to the room, kind of silly look on our face. They said, we got a question, something we can't figure out. They said, all these groups have their meetings, and they come to La Crosse and get drunk, tear the rooms up, vomit, get in fights. We call the police. We figure that's just the motel business. And then they looked at us and they said, then you people show up, we send the police on vacation. So, I mean, does that not tell you something about organic farmers? You know, we respect each other. I'll bet the vandalism where we stayed the last 2 days has been really, really low. I didn't see any on the way over here. Okay. Quality life becomes center of the piece. It really has to be that way. But we got to figure out how to get along with people. We have to make money, and these business principles are going to apply. They influence our actions, our livelihood. And if that isn't enough, we've got to deal with Mother Nature too. So there are some rules of human interaction. Effective leadership always deals with people issues first. You will always seek to control what you do not trust. This is the Gibbs Triangle. Jack Gibb now died, but this is how human beings interact. If you wish to have a stable relationship, your relationship will be seen as on the left over here. In this triangle, a small amount is control. In every human being relationship, there are goals and communications, and the big basis is trust. That relationship is stable. The triangle sits like it is because stable relationships are just that. There's a lot of trust, and they aren't going to go anywhere. I will guarantee you that in every situation that a stable relationship deteriorates, they will always start to resemble a triangle on the right-hand side. Now, what happened here? Where we had a lot of trust, it was replaced by a lot of control. We're moving towards instability. The unstable relationship that is control heavy still has goals and communications. There still is some trust there, or it'll completely collapse. And how do you support it? With rules and regulations. Exactly what you want to avoid in society. Yet I will guarantee you this is how society and agriculture will interact. It's how your parish council will interact. It's how two people will interact, period, because what we want to do is build a big basis of trust. A little control always exists, and anything that chips away at trust takes us backwards. Rule of human interaction. Rule number 3, the tone in all organizations is set at the top. The leadership sets the tone, period. So what kind of tone do the leaders set? I'll promise you in this conference over here, since I got here, I think the tone is pretty good. Meeting program has been excellent. Though I've never been to the OGRAIN conference before, it's just been a good experience. That's because your leadership tone is that way. Okay? So, let's look at this one. I stole this one from the computer guys. This is called the hype cycle. The hype cycle is all about change over time. So on the bottom of this graph is time, moves along. And then on the other side over here is the rate of change. So, okay, let's use no-till organic as an example. Didn't exist, didn't exist, didn't exist, didn't exist. Somebody came along with an invention that we think is going to cause change more rapidly as time progresses. So if this came along, let's say somebody knew how to roller crimp, and then somebody says we can roller crimp no-till and get good weed control while we save the soil at the same time, so you get a trigger event. Now what the trigger event does is the trigger event tells you that you're going to get a lot more change in a shorter period of time. Agree with that? And so the difficulty is that if you get into this trigger, you can get unrealistic expectations, thinking that you're going to get an extremely high rate of change in a very little period of time. Now, if you overdo that and you get the misapplications are going to tell you that, well, my expectations are too high, and I'm going to have a lower rate of change than I thought. And if your thing really starts to go sour, you get over here to the trough of disillusionment. Nothing's ever going to change, and maybe we'll go back to where you start out with, which is probably not true. But anyway, if you survive the whole thing, there's the slope of enlightenment. Now, that is the reality of change over time. I said, stole it from the computer, guys. I'm showing this to a crowd a while back, and the guy says, man, that's marriage. And he's probably right. Boy meets girl. What would the trigger event be? Any ideas? Unrealistic expectations? Misapplications? Oh, I've been married a few years too. Trough of disillusionment? Oh, I think we understand that one. But he says with marriage, the slope of enlightenment is almost perfectly flat. Human beings don't change that fast. Path in life you choose makes little difference to know where you're going. Where are we headed? Here's one from Winston Churchill. The worst mistake in leadership is to hold out false hopes that will soon be swept away, something Churchill avoided in the Second World War. He told the people how difficult this was going to be and didn't give them any unrealistic time frames on how long it was going to take to get this over with. He said, I'm going to tell you the truth, and that's what we're going to deal with it. I like the one from Charles Darwin. Survival has nothing to do with power, speed, and size, but everything to do with our ability to adapt to a changing world. So I think what Darwin said about evolution of the species and what's going on with organic agriculture today has a lot. Again, let's say the Stockdale paradox. I'm going to repeat this. You must maintain unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end regardless of the difficulties, and have the same time the discipline to confront the brutal facts of your current reality wherever they may be. I think this is extremely important, especially for people new into organics. You've got to face truth, you've got to deal with the facts, and you don't want to give yourself unrealistic expectations. All right? I'll give you a good example of this. Raised hogs my entire life. Went to a farm through the 70s and the 80s, and we get into these oncoming difficulties in the 90s with the collapses in the marketplace and where we're going with this very small hog operation. So we transitioned the farm to organic. We campaigned with the Department of Agriculture to allow an organic meat label. Talked George Siemens into starting an organic pork program, which George may have had second thoughts on later on, but we got started. But then what? We believed we were going to be successful. How important is it? I think extremely. We had to sell hogs at a loss for years. We had to put up with a lot of very difficult situations with logistics and transportation and problems with market development. I was board chair of the subsidiary of Organic Valley Co-op that had this part of the program for years. We lost a lot of money. But nobody said things are just going to get better next year. We had to believe that we're going to be successful long term, period. Churchill was right, period. 20 years later now, I know the programs haven't grown nearly what they should be growing to, but we get a stable pay price, and I'm very happy with how our programs are working. They need to be much bigger than they are. That's another campaign. But I didn't bail out the third year either. We invested long-term, believing things are going to improve, and they have. People issues are the highest. I'm going to repeat myself here because I think these are things important. Beyond question, the first test on any farm business or venture that seeks to be great and lasting, you will deal with the who's before you deal with the what's. Leaders are a study in duality. They are modest, willing, humble, and yet fearless. They are plow horses and not show horses. They keep a focus on long-term sustainability and avoid dwelling on short-term economics. Economics are important, but long-term is what matters. They create viability long-term in doing so. So let's talk about some truths in life around us. Let's be honest. There's too much erosion on organic farms. There's too much erosion on our farm, but now we are integrating a 6-year rotation that's going to cover the ground close to 90% of the time, and we're making progress. But we don't make progress without facing the truth. Let's talk about another one. Commercial ag is increasing pesticide use, and those chemicals are widely toxic. Iowa had no fungicides used in corn, almost completely zero, and now it's used in, what, 80% of the corn? I mean, this world is changing, not necessarily for the better. How about this one? Climate change rains are producing rainfall events that are way beyond the normal, and our soils cannot stand the pounding that these rains are giving us. Last year, our weather station tracked 60 inches of rain. Places around me got 70 inches of rain. Those soil loss equations are based on old data, not on the reality of what we're facing. We have to change. Okay? Concentration of land ownership and consolidation of livestock production destroying rural communities. It's obvious right across Iowa. But organic practices can address these critical issues. Let's see how. Leaders focus on results. Okay? Again, where I'm not, now on our farm, when I went through this, I felt much better about myself, this hedgehog concept. I like what I'm doing. I have no problem taking care of the livestock. Of course they have problems, but I mean, I like that part of the farm. I love my cows. I just enjoy what I'm doing, so I have no conflict with the passions about the farm. I am not the best at a long list of things. I'd argue I'm probably only average at most of the things I do, and I had to admit that. There are many people better at almost everything I do. But I kind of think I have a talent in appreciating the fact that a farm is a complex interrelationship, and all these pieces of the puzzle need to be held together. So my best asset is probably in keeping complex things together. And economic engines is our sales of organic proteins, whether it's animal proteins or soy proteins. And if you think I'm going to leave the center of those 3 circles, I lost my mind. There's no way in the world we're going to, because I feel good about being there. I feel better about myself. So now what about farming? We get the people issue resolved, and we go about trying to make a living. Mother Nature's got 4 rules. Water runs downhill. Fast above the ground, slow below the ground. It is as simple as it sounds. Let's take a look at what's going on around us. Everything we do that increases the runoff rate of water is a big social problem for us. Have you ever seen the engineering calculations with power and streams? As I think this should be into our tours, it should be in our literature. If you have a stream that's a foot deep, and I hope I'm remembering this right, but a foot deep, going 3 miles an hour, it has so much horsepower. And if that stream now is 2 feet deep, going 6 miles an hour, it's 16 times the horsepower. And that's because there's more water pressure with depth, and then there's more speed. So it is I forget the mathematics on this, it's a quadratic equation. As water runs downhill with climate change, rains are experiencing us to horsepower on these streams that is far beyond what we think it is. That's how a river can destroy an interstate highway. You just give it enough speed and enough depth, get the hell out of the road, because this is a very destructive feature. But it's a rule of Mother Nature, all right? There's no free lunch. There are always trade-offs. That's Mother Nature's second rule. So thinking that you're going to get a free lunch, I would argue, is one of the flaws of genetic engineering. You try to get something for nothing. Everything is related to everything else. This is another, I think, a fundamental flaw in genetic engineering, that we can change one thing and not change everything else, because everything is all interrelated. And regardless of what we do, what I will guarantee you is that Mother Nature will bat last every time, and she does not care a lick about time. So we have to learn how to get along with this powerful force over there who does bat last. How many people have heard the definition of a renewable natural resource? And I think we need to pressure political office holders about this. So what is a renewable natural resource? We heard the word renewable is thrown around all the time. But a renewable natural resource is one that it must be able to be created brand new in less than an average human being's lifetime. With this definition now, we can go back and seek the truth in our lives. So what is going on? Are we exhausting natural resources if they are non-renewable? Well, that's a big issue. So we hear it said that, well, Iowa agriculture's got to feed the world. I think a very good question to Iowa agriculture alone is, how much of the calories of food we produce are produced by exhausting non-renewable groundwater? Damn good question. What is going to happen when the groundwater resources are exhausted? If we're going to live with meat, protein, I may live and raising hogs and cattle. But if we make our living on proteins that are 100% required upon non-renewable resources to produce them, we face a dire consequence down the road. Are there answers to it? Sure there are. Figure out ways of changing our diets so our diets are using renewable natural resources. If we have food that's produced without relying upon groundwater resources, and a direct link like that, we are moving towards sustainability. But I would argue that we need to stand up and challenge politicians. Let's use this one. What's topsoil? Non-renewable. Groundwater, generally, non-renewable. Some groundwater is renewable. So what's wood? Very renewable. What's coal? Non-renewable. I mean, it gives us a dividing line, and maybe everybody knew this, but I had never heard the definition of this until I heard this from a lecture. So, okay, again, back with the triangle. So leadership examples can help us. We will not make progress if we don't address the people issues. The lack of young people in agriculture and the aging issue absolutely has to be addressed, all right? We have to reveal questions, ask revealing questions, not with bold statements to turn the tide. So we always have to ask these questions. If these products are used, if these practices are used, what are the long-term consequences? The facts can never be hidden. We have to deal with the brutal truth. We always have to seek these out. We have to look for problems. We have to expect leaders to set the tone. What is the tone in the organization? What is the tone in your organization on your farm? Where is your farm headed long term? Are you creating a tone that welcomes people and brings people in? Leaders frame discussions. They don't dominate the discussion. They bring parties in. But we can take these examples and we can improve our farms. So what is the farm doing over here? Just taking the sun's energy and taking it all the way through a cycle where we get a chance to grow things and hopefully convert things and sustain ourselves on the land and reinvest in the farm to go back into the sun's energy. You know, example, on our farm now, we're going to put solar in next month, but our house is geothermal. And so the outfit that is going to put our solar in says your geothermal house. That's pretty good because you should probably put another ground loop in because it's a soil geothermal system, because he said the sun's energy in the summertime will allow you very economically to air condition your house. When you air condition your house, you take heat out of the house to put it in the soil, which will act like a big battery. In the wintertime, you'll take the heat out of the soil to go back and heat your house. You're a pretty good deal, and you have surplus electricity to do it with. So there are things we can do to move ourselves forward. Okay? What we need to do is to look at working with breeders to improve our options. I struggled for a long, long time on our farm trying to address the issues of soil conservation and cropping systems. I'm in northern Iowa, a little cold feet on no-till, got to be totally honest with you. But when a crop came along like a plant in September, that's a winter annual to cover the ground. So this looks like it's going to fit very well into the rotation. and we have livestock to use it. So what's our, now this is taking us time, there's our third crop now we've got on the ground now this year. So what's our new rotation? Our new rotation starts with hay or pasture ground that historically would go to corn, but we're not doing that now. We'll take the hay or pasture ground in the month of September, apply our manure on that hay or pasture ground, moldboard plow it down, I have no problem with that whatsoever, working the plowing down and then planting grain rye, hybrid rye, on that fresh plowing. By the 1st of October, the plowing's green. Then we go through the winter, the ground's covered. We go through the spring, the ground's covered. We get into summer, we've got the ground covered. By the way, a great place for wildlife, fantastic place for wildlife. So anyway, now in July, we've got a harvest. That's fine. We harvest the grain. We bale the straw, which we need. Now we've got an opening in our cropping system to put in a winter-killed cover crop. We did that last year. So we planted 2 different mixes we got from the seed house that fixed nitrogen and yet winter kill. So now the ground is perfectly covered, and that stays out there to this very day. And we'll go in the spring, it'll be a dead thatch. Then with a minimum tillage in the spring, we will work that up and plant corn, and then after corn we go to beans, and then oats, and then hay, and then pasture. Now it's a 72-month cycle, and if you go and study 1 month at a time, those 72 months, about 90% of the time we got soil cover. We are vastly better than what we were before. You can say, well, why plow? Well, organic, I argue I need to plow, but I'm not doing my plowing now in the spring, exposing the ground to the heavy spring rains of May, June, and July. I'm doing my plowing now in September, and as soon as possible, that exposed soil is covered by a green mat. So I think we're really seriously moving forward, but we needed something to change things, and I am convinced. So I'm very supportive of these breeding programs and people, because how in the hell am I supposed to change this on my farm? I need something different to work with. So, wisdom of the Buddha. If you want to be a rock, you ought to be a precious gem. If you want to be a bird, you should be a white dove. If you want to be a flower, you should be a red rose. But if you want to be a human being, you have to be a revolutionary. So, we've got a little bit of time here. And I honestly God, I had no idea how long this was going to take. I didn't research it. So if you've got some time for some questions.
Yeah, we have some time for questions or comments on that inspiration. Oh, Mark in the back. Dylan has a mic. Mark.
Tom, I think it's important that the people in this room band together when we talk about marketing. Certainly fraudulent grains have been a big issue, and I've tried to been pushing the issue of an incoming organic tariff, gradually stepped up to allow production to come online in the U.S., to support the consumers and support, some of the end users of the big food industry and whatnot. But I think it's very, very important that fraudulent grain has been eating everybody's lunch, including the regenerative part of my farm. So if we don't get a handle on this and support U.S.-grown products, I don't think this may have the potential never to be mainstream in the U.S.
Yeah, and back to this, what is that doing? Those are very good comments, but we got to face the truth. That was fraud. People guilty of that have to be punished. The whole thing needs public exposure. Then hopefully that heals from that process. Absolutely, it has to be rooted on that and working together beyond a question of a doubt. You know, in our farm in northern Iowa, if I would have tried to go the route of direct marketing livestock, as much as that it can be a good approach in areas, that's not going to work in Chickasaw County, Iowa. We don't have the population base. I needed regional cooperative marketing where I would focus on what I'm doing and a co-op focuses on the other part of the marketing aspect of it. Now that fits with some people, doesn't fit with other people, but then the integrity of those programs becomes everything. Somebody attacks Organic Valley Co-op, I'm going to rush to defense right away because my livelihood comes from that. If they have problems of some kind, I'm going to try to help address it. In this whole situation with, especially like the pork programs haven't grown much, we'll have a conference on that in July in Waterloo. We've got to discuss why it's not growing, what can be done to expand those programs, and deal with the brutal truths on that. But the fraudulent marketing thing, the brutal truth is very, very clear. That's what we have to stand up for.
Maybe one more comment or question before I just make some announcements. Keith?
Okay, Tom, and I think maybe we discussed it together, but there is another thing that is causing, it is a real concern for me. And I'm on the Organic Valley Board, the crop board, and I've been seeing it the last 2 to 3, going on 3 years now, is that we're starting to plateau in the marketing. And we have not done a very good job, all of us together, and we need to be all together in this thing, of messaging. When we get articles that come out in the Washington Post, et cetera, that say, is organic really organic, or is there something better than organic? We worked a long time and a hard time to get the organic seal. And our integrity has to be the most important thing that we do. I don't know how we bring everybody together to understand this, that we have to somehow, as a whole organic industry, do a little better job on messaging, because we got a great thing, a really tremendous thing, and our consumers are misunderstood at times, and that is a big problem.
Yeah, we don't have any choice in that message. There's absolutely the battle in front of us, and we have to address it from, I think, Jeff Moyer, what he had yesterday morning, talking about pesticide use, and what's gone on since the year 2000. We've been organic for about that period of time. What's happened to agriculture? It's gotten absolutely worse. At the Practical Farmer meeting a week ago, they talked about the neonic insecticides and how now they're in all the water. They're in the wells. They're in the streams. They're in the lakes. They're in the vegetation around the streams all over the place. So this is something that the rest of society in the ag chem industry doesn't want to talk about. But we have to, what we're going to do, ignore these issues? We got to talk about these issues. We got to get public about these issues. I mean, what is really going on over here? We've got the high ground. We have to maintain the high ground and convince people. We don't sell enough organic pork. We need to get people to realize the big difference. Well, I'm going to take a look. I don't want to make our living by condemning how other people grow their crops, but there are differences. There are facts behind the differences, and campaign as such on what those differences are. So you're absolutely right. But what's at risk here is positively enormous.
All right. Thank you.